Hello everyone and welcome to the Crime Mosaic channel. When a Suffolk County officer was training his canine on Gilgo Beach, Long Island, he had not anticipated on finding a set of remains, which turned into finding the bodies of 3 other missing women, known as the Gilgo Four. This, in turn, set off a chain of events that led to the arrest of Rex Heuermann, who has been charged with and pleaded guilty to the murder of 8 women. The first body found was that of Melissa Barthelemy. Melissa Barthelemy, 24, was born in Erie, New York. She lived in Buffalo and had just been on a trip to New York with her boyfriend, where she met someone named Blaze, who had offered her a job of being a hairstylist at the beginning of 2006. Several months later, she broke up with her boyfriend at the time and moved to the Bronx, where she became involved with Blaze. Blaze would trick girls into becoming sex workers for him and even tattooed his name on them. By 2009, Melissa had escaped Blaze and was trying to work for herself when she had started posting things on places like Craigslist looking for clients. She would use the alias of Chloe. She accepted a call from a burner phone and a few days later received another call from the same person to meet up again. This was July 10th, 2010, when Melissa had told a friend she was meeting up with a client and would be home later. Melissa's final call that evening was to her ex Blaze, which he did not answer. Her cell phone records showed she was in Manhattan that evening on the 11th of July 2010, and at 1:43 a.m. Melissa's phone pinged near Massapequa, her last known location. July 18th, 2010, Melissa's mother had informed police of her disappearance. December 11th, 2010, she was found by Suffolk County Officer John Malia and his canine Blue. For up to 5 weeks after Melissa's disappearance, her younger sister received voice messages from someone who claimed they had killed her, and the messages contained vile things that the killer alluded to with her and her sister. On December 13th, 2010, 3 more bodies were found by police search: Amberlynn Costello, Maureen Brainard Barnes, and Megan Waterman. Amberlynn Costello, 27, recently having completed a 28-day rehab program, Amber left a sober living house and moved into a new property in West Babylon, New York. Amber was living with other people who, like her, had an addiction to heroin. Amber had a persistent client who was harassing her from a burner phone using $1,500 for an overnight stay, which is well above the usual rate Amber would get. Amber's other roommates were hesitant in her meeting up with this person, but she persisted that they needed the money. One of the roommates had noticed that a car leaving when Amber left was similar to a car that had been at the property the day before, a dark green Chevrolet. Amber's roommate had also described the perpetrator as an ogre, a large man wearing sunglasses. After finding the other bodies, investigators went back to Amber's case file and looked over the evidence, where they found her roommate's information given about the perpetrator and the description of his car. Maureen Brainard Barnes, 25, was living in Connecticut and was faced with an eviction notice after the breakdown of her relationship and couldn't afford to lose the roof over her and her children's head. Even with working as a telemarketer and trying to supplement her income with offering massages, it wasn't enough. Maureen's friend, who was still working as an escort, had offered her to come on a trip to New York with her and a male friend called Matt, who had been acting as her bodyguard. Maureen was desperate and needed to make the money for rent. July 6, 2007, Maureen went to Manhattan with Sarah and Matt. When they arrived, they found out Maureen's advert had been taken down. By 9th of July 2007, Maureen had only made $700 and knew she needed more, so told Sarah and Matt she would stay longer, much to their pleas for her not to stay alone. She then called another friend, called Sarah, to say she was stepping outside the Super 8 motel room to meet with a client. This was 11:43. When Sarah had not heard anything off Maureen by the 14th of July 2007, she went to Norwich Police to report her missing, who then worked with NYPD and later passed the case over to them. Sarah would later received a call from a burner phone asking if they were friends with Maureen and that he knew where she was. When Sarah asked where, he said Maureen was working at a whorehouse in Queens. Sarah pressed for the person's name and number and was told he would call back with more information. This person never called back. Her remains were found with belts as evidence and hair on the belt that did not belong to Maureen. The hair belonged to Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup. Megan Waterman was a 22-year-old mother of one living in Scarborough, Maine, where she met her boyfriend, Akeem. Megan met Akeem in 2009, and by 2010, she was working as an escort for him, and he had convinced her into moving to New York to continue the work as an escort, where she could make more money. When Akeem was released on bail one of the times he was imprisoned, he and Megan made Megan's fatal last trip to Long Island to visit his family, whilst Megan worked from her room at a Holiday Inn Express in Hepage, Long Island. Megan's mother last spoke to her on June 5, 2010. Later on, Megan phoned her grandma so she could check in with her daughter before she went to sleep. At 1:15 a.m. on June 6, 2010, Megan's boyfriend Akeem had phoned her, and 15 minutes later she said she needed to leave as she had had a call out to a client. At 11 a.m. that same day, Akeem got in touch with Megan's family asking if any of them had seen her. After waiting 48 hours, Megan's family went to the police and reported Megan missing. The last activity on Megan's phone showed that she received a phone call from a burner phone at 1:31 a.m, which coincided with CCTV of Megan leaving the hotel. The last recorded activity on Megan's phone was at 3:11 a.m. and showed she had been driven to Massapequa Park. Megan was the last set of remains found on the 13th of December 2010. There were an additional 6 sets of remains found in that part of the Long Island area, 3 of which have been linked to Heuermann, and 1 set of remains were agreed to in a plea of Heuermann's. The 3 additional sets of remains were found and linked to Heuermann are Jessica Taylor, Sandra Cortilla, and Valerie Mack. The additional set of remains that was agreed to in Heuermann's plea deal was Karen Vergata. Jessica Taylor, 20. Having left home during her teen years, Jessica ended up moving to Brooklyn from her hometown of Poughkeepsie and fell into the sex work through her boyfriend, Khalil White, and lived with him and another woman. Jessica went through legal trouble due to drugs and being arrested for prostitution. July the 14th, 2003, Jessica had turned just 20, and the next day, July 15th, 2003, at 1 a.m, Jessica had had a fight with Khalil and decided to leave and take her dog with her. Her car had broken down and she feared Khalil would find her, so she took the offer of a group of people to be dropped off near the 45th Street and 9th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, near the Port Authority area where she had normally worked. She had gone through other drug services and had recently been staying on the couch of another person that was helping her get out of the situation. Jessica had changed her hair, changed her phone, and had started carrying a Bible around, wanting to change her life and go back home. A witness remembered seeing her around the Port Authority area around July 18th to the 23rd, 2003. Sometime between July 22nd and the 26th, Jessica's phone records showed that she had phoned a number in Long Island that had driven her to New York before. The identity of the caller is unknown. The partial remains of Jessica were found on July the 26th, 2003, in Maniville, New York. When a Washington, D.C. detective had recognized a bulletin in February 2004 where he had recognized Jessica's tattoo and contacted Suffolk County to help with identification. On March the 29th, 2011, more remains were found, and on May the 9th, 2011, they were formally identified to belong to Jessica. Sandra Costilla, 28, of Trinidad and Tobago descent, and had lost both parents at a young age. She had lived in New York at the time of her disappearance and was known to local authorities as a drifter. There isn't much known about what Sandra was up to during these final few months of her life, but Sandra had been added into the police database due to having her identification taken for jumping a subway turnstile in 1992. Hunters found Sandra's remains in a wooded area in North Sea, Southampton on the 21st of November 1993. It is believed her remains had been there for a few days, as they were able to identify her through her fingerprints. Sandra was linked to Heuermann due to the perpetrator's DNA on an item of clothing pulled over Sandra's head, and hair found at the scene, not belonging to Sandra, but Heuermann's ex-wife. Valerie Mack, 24, was living in New Jersey for a time with her adopted family to help with managing a newly found condition and trying to get back into work and staying away from substances. In October, Valerie leaves home to go visit her son at her half-sister's house in Wildwood, New Jersey. By the spring of 2000, Valerie's family had stated they had last had contact with her where she had been working as an escort in Philadelphia. She was arrested 3 times during this period for drugs, prostitution, and loitering. She had used the alias Melissa Taylor. Tragically, Valerie's family were never able to report her missing before her remains were found. On the 19th of November in 2000, in the wooded area of Maniville, Suffolk County, a hunter's dog found the partial remains of Valerie. Over a decade later, on the 4th of April 2011, the rest of Valerie's remains were found along Ocean Parkway on Gilgo Beach, Long Island. On May the 28th, 2020, police identified the remains of Valerie Mack by finding her aunt, who led the investigators to her son, who confirmed it was Valerie through DNA. Karen Vergata, 34, was reported missing around the 14th of February 1996 by her father, and authorities believed she was working as an escort at the time. Karen was sadly never reported missing, and her partial remains were first found on Fire Island on the 20th of April 1996. 15 years later, on the 11th of April 2011, the rest of Karen's remains were recovered from Tobay Beach, the second set to have been found that day in Nassau County. Investigators believe her other set of remains may have drifted from Long Island, and she was the 8th victim named as a part of the plea deal. During the findings of the bodies during the 1990s, the FBI had originally helped with the searches, but were never involved with the investigation. On the 10th of December 2015, Suffolk County Commissioner Tim Senior announced that the FBI had officially joined the investigation of the murders. This came just 2 months after the resignation of former Chief of Police James Burke, who was later charged and imprisoned, which is another interesting case. I have only included the bodies that have been included in the charges against Heuermann. There have been other remains found in the Gilgo Beach area and around at the same time as the other victims that were found on Long Island. The perpetrator on trial for these crimes is Rex Heuermann. Heuermann was born and lived his life at the home of his parents in Wichita, in Massapequa Park, at the south shore of Long Island. Some childhood acquaintances of Heuermann described him as a mama's boy, and said to have had a close relationship with her. Heuermann graduated from Berner High School, Massapequa Park in 1981. He studied architecture at the New York Institute of Technology, and by 1987 had a job working for an architecture firm in Manhattan. Heuermann was married and divorced by 1991, and by 1996 was married to his second wife and has a stepchild and one child together. In 2022, police began to suspect Heuermann after they found information from a witness pertaining to a description of a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, and the description the witness had given of the person driving the car, which was a close match to him. Mitochondrial DNA testing was done by investigators taking leftover pizza crusts as evidence from the trash of Heuermann's home. They also made a match of mitochondrial DNA to hair found on a burlap sack wrapped around one of the victims. They also found a potential match of hair to Heuermann's wife, who was proved to be aware with the children when Heuermann was doing this. On the 13th of July 2023, Heuermann was arrested, aged 59, in Midtown Manhattan, and originally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. On the 6th of June 2024, he was then arraigned and charged with the murders of Maureen Brainard Barnes, Jessica Taylor, and Sandra Costilla. Sandra was not previously linked to the case and helped the investigators get an extended timeline to show just how long Heuermann had been doing this for. Heuermann accepted a plea deal and changed his plea to guilty of 8 murders, including the added charge of the murder of Karen Vergata, and his sentencing hearing is due on or around the 17th of June 2026. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please click and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for the next one. Stay safe out there, guys.